Narrative control and memory distortion are not peripheral features of parental alienation. They are central mechanisms through which psychological control is stabilized over time. Once emotional conditioning and role reversal are in place, narrative processes provide the cognitive structure that makes the altered attachment reality feel coherent, justified, and internally consistent to the child. Children do not store memory as fixed recordings of past events. Developmental research consistently demonstrates that autobiographical memory is reconstructive, relational, and context-dependent. Children remember through meaning-making, not transcription. Memory is shaped by repetition, emotional salience, authority, and the need for coherence within the child's relational world. In parental alienation dynamics, narrative control operates by repeatedly pairing interpretations with emotional consequence. Events are not merely recalled, they are explained. These explanations are often subtle, indirect, and framed as concern, clarification, or shared reflection rather than accusation. Over time, explanation becomes expectation. Repetition is the first mechanism. When a particular interpretation of the other parent's behavior is repeated, especially in emotionally charged contexts, it becomes familiar. Familiarity reduces cognitive effort and uncertainty. For children, familiarity also signals safety. An interpretation that is repeated by a primary caregiver gains authority, regardless of its factual accuracy. Suggestion operates alongside repetition. Suggestions do not need to be explicit. They often appear as questions, doubts, or speculative statements. A child hears uncertainty introduced around motives, memory, or intent. Because children rely on caregivers to interpret social reality, these suggestions are incorporated into the child's own meaning-making process. The child begins to doubt prior interpretations and replace them with those that align with the caregiver's emotional stance. Reframing is the third mechanism. Neutral or positive experiences are reinterpreted through a different emotional lens. Past events are contextualized in ways that explain current emotional tension. This reframing resolves dissonance. If affection for the targeted parent produces distress in the primary environment, reframing past interactions as problematic or harmful restores emotional coherence. These processes do not operate through conscious deception. They operate through the child's need for relational consistency. Children are motivated to maintain a stable internal narrative that aligns with their emotional environment. When emotional contingencies reward certain interpretations, cognition follows. Memory distortion emerges gradually. Specific details may fade, while general impressions remain. Emotional tone replaces episodic clarity. The child may express certainty without concrete examples, or moral conclusions without lived nuance. This pattern is often misinterpreted as conviction or insight. From a cognitive developmental perspective, it reflects narrative consolidation under constraint. Importantly, memory distortion in this context is not equivalent to fabrication. It is an adaptive process. The child's memory reorganizes to reduce conflict between experience and emotional reality. When the child's current environment signals that one relationship is unsafe or destabilizing, memory adjusts to support that signal. Narrative control also influences perception in the present. Ambiguous behaviors are interpreted through the established frame. Neutral actions are assigned negative intent. Positive actions are discounted or viewed with suspicion. This perceptual bias further reinforces the narrative, creating a self-sustaining loop. As the narrative stabilizes, the child's identity begins to align with it. Children seek consistency between who they are, what they feel, and what they believe. When the narrative frames the targeted parent as unsafe or unworthy, continued attachment threatens identity coherence. Distancing becomes not only emotionally protective, but cognitively necessary. This is why children in alienation contexts often resist contradictory information. Challenging the narrative threatens emotional equilibrium. It reintroduces ambivalence, which conditioned systems experience as destabilizing. Resistance to alternative perspectives is not stubbornness. It is self-protection. Narrative control is further strengthened by social reinforcement. When the child's narrative is echoed by others in the environment, extended family, professionals, or institutions, the interpretation gains legitimacy. Authority multiplies. The child's confidence increases, even as accuracy may decrease. From a graduate-level analytic standpoint, this process closely parallels mechanisms observed in other contexts of undue influence, indoctrination, and coercive persuasion. The defining feature is not the content of the belief, but the conditions under which it was formed. Beliefs formed under relational constraint cannot be evaluated as independent judgments. Narrative control also explains why traditional fact-checking approaches often fail. Correcting details does not alter the emotional contingencies that sustain the narrative. Without changes to the relational environment, new information is either rejected or assimilated into the existing frame. Over time, the narrative becomes autobiographical truth. The child experiences it as self-generated. This is the most powerful stage of narrative control, because external reinforcement is no longer required. The child now actively maintains the story that preserves safety. In the context of parental alienation, narrative control and memory distortion serve a regulatory function. They allow the child to live in a world that feels emotionally predictable, even if it is relationally impoverished. The cost is accuracy, complexity, and access to a full attachment network. Understanding these mechanisms is essential for assessment and intervention. Apparent certainty, moral clarity, or emotional detachment should not be taken at face value. They must be interpreted in light of the narrative conditions that shape them. Narrative control does not create alienation on its own. It stabilizes it. It provides the cognitive scaffolding that allows emotional conditioning and loyalty conflict to persist over time, until the conditions that reward a particular narrative are altered. Memory and meaning will continue to reorganize around emotional survival rather than relational truth. And that is why parental alienation cannot be understood solely as a breakdown in relationship. It is also a breakdown in shared reality, constructed slowly, reinforced quietly, and maintained through the child's need for coherence in an emotionally constrained system.